Hello, everybody. Welcome to Karma and Tranquility. This week, we interviewed the amazing Strokes producer, Gordon Raphael, who worked on the first two Strokes records, Is This It and Room on Fire. It was incredibly exciting, and there's a lot of stories in here that I feel like a lot of you guys might not have heard before. A lot of tidbits you might not have known on how this stuff is kind of made. It was me and Will doing this interview. Will's camera died about 50 minutes into the interview, right around the end. But it was a very, very good interview. It was our first professional interview. And what was really cool was he used the machine that he used to record Julian's vocals on Is This It to record his voice, during the Zoom call and the audio. It's crazy. We unfortunately weren't able to have our nice mics work for this because we just did not have all the pieces yet. So that's why it sounds like we're kind of on a call. But we have all the supplies now for all that kind of stuff. Season 2 is right around the corner, or at least recording Season 2 is right around the corner, and we have all our professional stuff. But I'm just going to let you guys listen. Please enjoy our interview with Gordon Raphael. Hello,
Whoa.
sir. Can you hear us?
Yeah, I can. Hi.
Hello.
How you
What's
doing?
up?
Pretty well. How about yourselves?
We're great. We were just having a laugh because Will thought we were doing it at 8 p.m. our time.
Yeah.
And he said, and I'm like, no, it's at 3 o'clock, because he was like, oh wait, so are we ready to go over some notes? I'm like, no, we're starting in like a minute. He's like, oh crap, you made 8 p.m. his time. Like, nope. No, 3 p.m. our time.
That's all right.
Well,
But hey, man, it is an honor to have you on here. We really, really appreciate you taking the time to do this. We are super new to this game. We've loved the Strokes for a long time now, and we've loved the work that you did on that, of course, which is why we asked you to be on here. But we wanted to embarrass you a little bit and just tell you how great you are and how much we appreciate you taking the time to talk to us.
thank you very much. Glad to hear it.
I just kind of wanted to, first of all, like, if you wanted to talk a little bit about what you've been doing recently, because I did a lot of looking at what you got releasing. You got a Absinthe coming out, or it's out now, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just released the last record I made before I left Seattle back in like the late 90s. It was a band called Absinthe with this really awesome singer called Anne Hadlock. And we made a couple albums. We moved to New York together. She helped me start the studio that actually recorded the Strokes in. And
wow.
we finally released the first album that we recorded, and we put it up on the streaming services called I Dream Angels.
How was the process for that? What was the experience like working with that experience?
Well, that experience was unbelievable because up until that moment, I'd kind of been using my basement to record everything I ever did.
Wow.
And her family owned this incredible studio, they still do, in near Seattle called Bear Creek. And it's like a state-of-the-art studio where like Soundgarden recorded there, Nirvana, Alice in Chains, Foo Fighters.
Big names.
You wouldn't believe it. It's like a real studio out in the countryside. And so I took my songs that I made in my basement and we got to use that studio. And it was the first time I heard what like super good microphones sounded like and what really great. Recorded it all on tape, 2-inch 24-track tape. So it was a real incredible, uplifting experience.
Wow, that's awesome. I listened to a lot of it. I listened to one of your songs, "Free to Lie." I loved that song. It was awesome. So I just want to at least point that out. Like that song was great. That was one of my favorites. I went to your website and looked at all your stuff, your art, your music, everything. You got a lot of stuff going on. I love it. It's awesome.
You mean the gordotronic.com website?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes,
right.
GordonTron.com. I love that. Yes, and I did see too that you wrote a book about the world is gonna love this up from the basement with the Strokes. Um,
Yeah, I wrote a book about the experience of going to New York and meeting the Strokes and recording the two albums and the EP.
yeah, I need to read that. I saw that and I was like, oh my god, how did I not see that before? I can't wait to get a hold of that and read that. That's gonna be exciting. Um,
It's pretty good.
Yeah. Oh, I bet. And I hear a lot of good things about it. A lot of good things about it.
Good.
Um, before we get too into the Strokes, I kind of wanted to give you a little bit of like a background on like what we kind of did here. Me, Will, who's the gentleman with me now, and our other friend Manny. He couldn't be here today, but we made this podcast for just the love of the Strokes. We're our Strokes and Arctic Monkeys podcast. Um,
Okay.
they're kind of intertwined for us, and we're like, hey, like if we do this, it's gonna be super unique. We have fan bases, and we have a lot of people on Instagram and Reddit that engage with us and ask us some questions. And we made a post about possibly interviewing you, and we had a lot of questions that they asked too that we worked into what we were gonna ask you. But everyone's super excited to have you here, like the fan base that we have as well. So one thing I wanted, if you could go ahead.
Don't forget to ask me my one Arctic Monkey story that I have. I have one in my life, and we got to talk about it.
Okay, okay. Well, we
Awesome.
will. Yeah, I can't forget that. Can't add that right now. But before we get started, could you go a little bit into like what a producer does for people that don't know, like in music? Can you go over
Okay.
like some of like the basics of what a good producer should do, like what the process is?
Well, just like I said, what happened with me and Absentee, there comes a time when a musician wants to go into a studio and stop making something at home by themselves. They think maybe if we go a place with like a bunch of $10,000 microphones and tape machines and huge room, maybe we can get a better sound, or maybe we can do something different than we do in the bedroom.
Mm-hmm.
And but the experience of like you kind of need a guide to walk you through that experience, like make sure everything goes good. Someone fighting in your corner so that you don't get swallowed up by all the choices and technology and the process and the time and the money. It all comes into play. And so many different kind of producers do things different way, but basically since I'm a musician and a composer and I record my own stuff, I kind of know what a musician wants to be treated like, and I kind of be very friendly and very helpful and kind of make them have fun. I kind of force them to have a good time, because I know that if you're not having a good time, it's hard to play your music correctly. Like if you're stressed out or worried about something, or you're not sure you're doing it right, you can actually play kind of crappy. But on the other hand, if someone is giving you all the best experience, you kind of feel like Superman and you can do your job better.
Yeah.
So I think that's kind of what a producer is for me, someone who guides musicians through the recording process to make sure they get what they want out of the deal.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's a lot of,
That's
and
awesome.
I picked up a lot about on that. A lot of the interviews that I did listen with you, and a lot of research that I did, and a lot of good things that people had to say. And I watched one of your interviews, and you were talking about the story about how you met the Strokes for the first time, which I want to get to. But I love that it's the DBS Institute interview I watched of you.
Right?
I love that interview, everything about it. But I heard a lot of good things about like how you were with the guys, with everyone that you've worked with, and everyone had like great things to say. And like I'm a musician myself. I've never actually worked with a producer or like recorded music professionally. I do all my stuff on my MacBook, and
Right.
I try to get by with the money that I have, and that's why you work. That's the goal. I'm a
Right.
bassist. I'm a bassist at heart. That's my favorite instrument. I love it. It's so fun. But
Great instrument. I
yeah, I
love it
love it.
too.
It's beautiful.
Excuse me.
I Nothing's better than a good bass line. I'm a big Paul McCartney fan. I got a Paul McCartney Sergeant Pepper tattoo on my arm. Like that's where it comes from. Um, but on the topic of producers, how did you become a producer? Like what inspired you to get into that? Like how did that come about for you?
Well, I guess you're doing the same thing as me. I wanted to write my own songs, and I also didn't want anybody to look at me while I was doing shit, because I was always working with these expert musicians and I wasn't an expert, but I knew I had some ideas. And if some big expert was crossing their arms and telling me that I missed a note or that was a shitty tone or my lyrics, so I just wouldn't be able to do anything. So I thought, if I can learn how to record all by myself, I bet some great stuff is going to happen. And that's basically what I did. In those days, we didn't have MacBooks. We had 4-track reel-to-reel tape recorders and little mixing consoles, like little 8-channel PA mixers from Yamaha, and a bunch of mic cables and an echo machine and a phase shifter and a SM57, just like everybody has. And I also was a synthesizer player, so I had lots of keyboards and organs and things that gave me a little bit of a unique sound at the time.
Yeah. And that definitely shows up in a lot of your music that you do too. I love that. And I saw one of your Instagram pictures recently of like all your instruments on your that you have. That's quite a collection you got there. It's awesome.
Thanks.
Love that. Let me see. So on the topic of the show, so move to Is This It? Did you know that it was number 68 on the Apple Music top 100 of all time?
Yeah, I think it's a bit of a low position. It should be. I mean, should be higher up the charts, for goodness sake.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with and it's like, how do you like not put Room on Fire in the top 100 either when they're literally like that's crazy.
Well, the world has strange music tastes. That's
exactly.
How I feel.
Yeah. Exactly. I try not to pay too much attention to that stuff, but it is a pretty cool thing. Like when I saw that pop up, I was like, oh wow, that's really cool. I'm excited to ask you about that, and how much that, that's an awesome accolade coming right from Apple itself. It's pretty cool.
Yeah.
I love the story that you tell, and I don't know if Will heard it, but I love the story that you tell on how you got involved with the Strokes. There's a lot of funny things in there. I know you probably talked about it a million times, but could you tell us a little bit about how that started, how it came to be for Is This It?
It goes back to that very same band I was talking about that I just released our album, Absinthe. Me and Anne moved our band from Seattle to New York after the grunge scene in Seattle died. And we were always looking for someone to, help us do promotion, to like get us good shows and stuff like that. And we met this really cool young woman named Carrie Black. And she said, you got to come to this party I'm throwing at the Luna Lounge, to see what kind of stuff I do. And I said, okay, fine. And there was a band playing. The very first band that played was called Come On, and I thought they were fantastic. And I had a little business card for my studio in New York called Transporter Realm. And I went to that band and I said, hey, man, come to my studio. You'll love it. I'll make a demo with you and it'll be great. And then this other band came on afterwards and they're called The Strokes. And I didn't really like them as much as the first band, but I thought they were interesting and they seemed very proud of themselves. Like they had a lot of charisma on stage for being so young. And I didn't think too much of them, but after the show, when I saw Albert and Nick get back on stage to get their pedals and start putting their gear away, I kind of walked up to them and I said, hey, I have a studio down the street. Here's my card. Come by, we'll make a demo. And the band I liked, Come On, didn't call me, but Albert called a couple days later and came running over to the studio to check out the scene. And he said, okay, we're going to hire you to do a demo for us.
Nice. That's awesome. That's it's what was it like when I know you said when you met them you liked their charisma that they had. Who do you think had the most like at that time? Like who rubbed off on you first?
I could only watch the drummer, Fab. He was doing this. I actually talked to him about this recently. He's like, he was doing this move where he didn't only play the drums with his arms and his hand, he put his whole back and his neck into each snare hit. And it looked like somebody was going to snap their neck off. It looked like he was going to have an accident with every hit. I was waiting for a tragedy, right?
Yeah.
And then I told him about that. Like last September, I met them in London and I said, hey, Fab, when I first saw you, you were doing that thing with your back. I thought you were going to kill yourself. He said, I know, because the guys kept telling me to play the snare louder, play it louder.
Yeah.
I was trying my best.
Which is crazy because like I've seen there was a video I think it was Taken for a Fool they played on one of the late night shows and he's absolutely demolishing those drums and I remember like Julian was like looking back it's a really good I don't know if you've ever seen it but the performance I'll have to look exactly what late show it is but he's like playing the snare so hard. I think Julian looks back at him. He's like, what are you doing? And then like when they go to leave off the stage, Julian like pushes it and like messes with them, like they're like messing around with each other as they're leaving. It's so funny. But yeah, he can smack those things if he wants to.
I know.
It's crazy.
Mm.
So did you immediately get a sense with how like talented Julian was when you like first heard him sing? Like he's one of my favorite singers of all time. He's just so unique. Like what was your first impression like when you heard him actually do what he does?
I think, you know, I didn't, he was very unusual as a singer. I always tell like most singers, like they can't wait for the band to get done so they can do their part, and they're like the star, and they run out and they put on a show for everyone. They like do a lot of moves, you know? And when it was his turn to sing, the very first time we ever recorded on the Modern Age EP, I said, okay, you know, go sing your part now. And he kind of looked real sheepish and kind of stared down at the floor and like, do I have to go now? You know, kind of he's trying to bargain. Like, there's nothing else to do, and kind of walked out real slowly. And he didn't look so enthusiastic. He just looked like, oh man, more worried.
Well, it's my turn, I guess.
Oh, I gotta do it now. Okay, here goes. Let's see what happens. And I really liked, like the first thing they sung was like the Modern Age, and I thought that the lyrics were so cool and it had such a cool vibe, and I really liked him. But then something like when he was doing like Take It or Leave It on the album, you know, that was later, that was months later.
Yeah.
But when he sang that song, man, I was absolutely like flabbergasted. Like my jaw was open. I was going, what the actual fuck?
Yeah.
You know,
What am I hearing?
He sounded like a truck exploding or just some crashing through a wall. Is so intense what was coming through the speakers in my control room when he was singing that. That's when I was going like, oh my God. I knew he was really smart. He was doing a lot of smart moves all the time, like with the music, like, you know, that hi-hat's rushing a tiny bit. Oh, we got to kind of make, why is that louder than that? You know, he's really into
so he was involved.
So I knew he was like a brainiac for music, but when he sang Take It or Leave It, that's when I went like, oh my God, that voice is like, you know, unbelievable.
Yeah. Wow. That's awesome. I didn't know that he was that like involved with kind of everything that was going on.
You have no idea. Well, you know, basically you have to know that it turned out that he wrote all the parts on the first album and the second album. Like, he wrote all the hi-hats, you know, the bass line, the solo, everything's his. It starts with that. And of course, because of that, everybody had a lot to say. Like even like Fab, Nick, Nikolai, Albert, you know, everybody was on it all the time with comments and suggestions. They were listening and they were smart as hell.
Yeah.
But you can imagine, because he knew how every part should be, and he also has an uncanny sense of pitch and rhythm. So if anything was even the slightest bit like lazy or off or rushed on the rhythm, he would just like jump on it. Like, what the fuck? We got to do it again. Or, hey, that, you know, we can't let that go. You know, nothing could be let go. Yeah.
Wow. That's even better. Like when I can picture him kind of being more involved in that. That's awesome. And like I always knew, like just from listening to interviews and watching him and knowing who he is, like I always knew that he just knew music and understood it. But it's that's awesome. He's even involved in like, you know, the arrangement and the drums, everything like that. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Now like with Albert and Nick, one of my favorite things to talk about is how, and I try to put this in the words all the time, but how amazing they are with like handing off with each other. Like, you know, one's doing the rhythm, one's doing the lead, and then they swap off, and their licks and their chords. Like, I don't think anyone, like, there's very few like guitar duos that can like do what they do in the way that they do it. Does that make sense? Like, they're both so unique and crazy. Like some of the finger picking that Albert will, or the, you know, the way he approaches the chords, and then the finger picking that Nick will do, like, or vice versa. It's so, I feel like I could pick them out if you put them in a song, even if it wasn't the Strokes, and be like, oh, it's those two. Like, it's crazy. Did you pick up on that too when you heard them play?
Well, very quickly I picked up, especially on the album, working on the album, I picked up on how goddamn difficult those parts were, and even sometimes more so on Room on Fire, some of those guitar solos, the rhythms of them are so
Yeah.
particular and so mathematical, and they rock, yet they're precise, you know? So it wasn't lost on me that these guys were just really playing on top of their game, and they were really being precise about everything and hugely talented. Yeah.
Yeah.
And also, it was a surprise also on that same song, Take It or Leave It, because Albert plays that solo. And I thought, oh, I thought, you know, Nick was the lead guitar player and Albert was the rhythm
Yep.
guitar player. But no, look at that solo that Albert just did. Oh my God, I had no idea he was
Yeah.
capable of that.
It's like a Lennon, it's like a Lennon McCartney, George Harrison, whoever type situation. Like it's like genius on both sides. No matter who you have doing it, you're good.
Right.
I love that. And one of the fan questions that we did on Reddit that they wanted to ask about was what mic were you using on Fab's drums on the first couple albums? What was the setup there for those two?
Well, the EP and the first album were funny because they had like 3 drum mics.
Yeah.
You know, I didn't have a lot of equipment. It was my studio. So I had like a Beta 52 on the kick drum. I remember that. I had a Bayer Dynamic, some kind of M88, I think it's called, on the snare. And I think I had something on an overhead or something. I don't remember what it was, but I had the same mic I used for vocals, and because the singer wasn't singing, I had a room mic. I used it as a room mic. So it kind of picked up a lot of depth from the drum kit that also had noise from the band in it. So basically on the first 2 album, you know, the EP and the album, it's really minimal, super 3 drum mics, okay?
Yeah.
And then for Room on Fire, we had a really big studio. I wasn't living in New York anymore, so we used a huge studio, and I set it up with more mics. You know, like I like to use 421s on tom-toms. I like to use 421 on a kick drum. You know, those Sennheiser they're like the second most common mic in the world,
Yep.
but they are so
Sennheisers are great.
damn good. They're so damn good. I love them.
Yeah.
And yeah, I'd probably use some, I don't know what I would have used for overheads for that album. Yeah.
What was it like the first day that you kind of like went in to record with them? Like what was the vibe? How did that feel when you first went in on that first day?
The vibe was really up because they liked the sounds of the studio. Like they weren't like, oh shit, that's not a good drum sound. Oh man, we got to work. You know, it wasn't like hard to do. I set up sounds, I dialed them in, and like there was a lot of smiles, right? Oh yeah, cool. Now let's play. It quickly shifted from me producing to them playing.
Yeah.
And then I noticed, whoa, they're not messing around. You know, they're if they're just working and work. They not like a lot of people say like, hey, close enough for jazz, or it's only rock and roll. It's not supposed to be rocket science. But that wasn't their approach was not like that at all. Like their approach was like, we're gonna do it, and if we make a mistake, we're gonna start over and do it again. And they had this work ethic that was just showing from the very first moment I recorded them. So I was like, wow, these guys are deadly serious.
Yeah. I had it's backtracking just a little bit. I know the one story I did hear that I loved. Can you tell the story that you were mentioning about I guess they were looking to possibly have a different producer like at one point for Is This It, the LP.
Right.
And then I remember you saying something, Julian was like, crap, now we have to go with the other guy. Can you tell that story real quick? I love that story. It's so funny.
You know, we made this demo, the Modern Age EP thing, and then they got signed on it. A record label in England, Rough Trade, put that out into the world like a demo. It wasn't even something we worked hard on. Like we worked hard, but we only had 3 days to do 3 songs. So usually in those days, if you made a demo and you got a deal, then you went back in the studio and you re-recorded the songs and you really spent time on it. But they released that thing and they got a really big buzz. And I'm going like, whoa. They're talking about our record in England right now. I'm probably going to be famous, and like, I wonder what's going to happen next. Yeah. So I was like waiting for them to like ask me to do the album, but instead Julian took me to dinner and said that the label wanted them to use a really experienced record producer. And I was only, by the time I recorded the Modern Age EP, I'd only been a professional producer for like 2 years. And everything was just CDs on my shelf. Nobody put records out. I had a total of 0 CD sales in the world at that moment.
Yeah.
And the guy that they were thinking of from England, Gil Norton, he sold like 5 million copies of everything he'd done since the 80s. So he had like 20 years he did the Pixies and a lot of stuff, really heavy hitter guy. And so Julian asked me at this dinner, he said, like, if you tell me, Gordon, that you're a better producer than him, we'll use you. And I said, Julian, man, like everybody's loving our sound. We look great together, but this guy sells 5 million copies and I sold 0 copies. I'm not going to stand here and say I'm a better producer than Gil Norton. And he just said, like, fuck you. Then we're not using you. We're using him because we didn't say you're better and we have to use the best one. Otherwise, we might not have a chance in our career.
Jeez. That sounds like so Julian too. Like I feel like I can hear that. That's so funny. And then they end up going with you anyway, and it was the best decision they could have made. So it all worked out.
Luckily, they came back, and I jumped up in the air when I found out they were. When he called me and said, "Can we record with you?" I was like, Christmas and birth all together.
That's funny because you were just trying to be humble. You're like, you know what? I just want the best for you guys at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not gonna lie, but at the same time, when he walked out after that dinner and I saw him go away saying "fuck you" and he left, I'm kind of like, why did I have to be so honest? Fucking A. Now I'm gonna be stuck in that basement recording like small bands for the rest of my life.
No, did the right thing. Like I mean, it's honorable to do something like that. You don't want to lie about that. And then if something doesn't go the way you want, it would have been a worse situation anyway. But everything went the way it was supposed to, and the album is what it is now. And so that's what's crazy. One of my questions I have, which is kind of like it's a dumb question, but I'm always curious. Like, were you involved on how like the singles were picked on an album like this? Because I feel like all of them are no, not at all.
Like I was involved in when they said, here's how our song goes, and they played, I was involved in capturing that and making sure we recorded the sound correctly and it sounded the way they wanted. When it came to decisions, like about song titles and stuff, that's to the band. Gotcha. Singles was between the band and the record label, because the record label in those days was using this, like if we put out this single, then that's like the strongest foot forward that maybe people are going to, pick up on the band, and that's going to make us be able to get our money back from the deal we just made with them. So the singles with the Strokes, I think, were negotiations between very high up record label people from RCA in America and the band, like discussing. And I don't think it was like nobody was forcing anybody, but there were strong discussions, and I wasn't at those discussions.
Gotcha. Cool. Well, yeah, that's really interesting to know. I that's something I've always wondered is like, how does that process happen, especially on such a strong album where you could have like 5 singles from it? It's just so good. So I was always curious, like how something like that was put together. That's awesome. That's interesting to know. With when you did Is This It? Did I know there's some answers like that out there, but with the work that you did on this and the success that it had, did it end up leading you to working with other artists? Like, what kind of attention did it get you in that time?
Yeah, I mean, at that moment, like, man, especially in England, like people were just crazy about that album and crazy about the Strokes. And you wouldn't know this from streaming services or MP3s, but they actually put my photo on the album right next to theirs. So on the vinyl and on the CD, you open it up, it's like 5 guys of the Strokes and their manager and me and JP, their guru, all the same size. So like no bands ever put pictures of their damn producer, and it was the luckiest thing for me, because in London, everybody'd seen those records and, hey, there's that guy, man. There's that guy. So I was actually recognized from that record cover, and it got me a lot of work and a lot of parties and a lot of fun, I have to say.
Yeah, that's awesome. I have the record over here. Actually, I'm one of those people that gets records and like keeps them sealed because they look so nice. I need to not do that. I need to open it. I need to look at it now. I'm curious what that looks like. That's sweet. how does the album kind of sit in your mind like today? Like how do you look back on it? Like what's like the is this it? Like how does that feel for you now today?
Well, not only do I think it sounds really cool, and I love it whenever I'm out in public and I hear a song from it, but it's kind of like it represents a gigantic blessing, like some weird thing that just came out of the blue, and my life was different before, and my life was different after. And Julian's told me the same thing. Their life was different before that album, and it completely changed after that album.
Yeah.
And I think we both have good feelings about what it did. Um, I don't know. A lot of people still to this day want to talk about it. So that's
Mhm.
really cool. 20 odd years later, people are still like, hey, I like that record. And this is what I was doing when it came out. And, they want to talk about it. So I think that's really cool.
Yeah. I agree with that. I do hear, and Will, I think you can agree, like you still hear these songs played, at stores and at restaurants and
Mhm.
clubs and stuff. Like you hear people are covering it all the time, or songs, whether it's Someday, Last Night, Hard to Explain, any of them. Like it's crazy. And I've got to imagine, this is just the fan come out of me. Like it's got to be awesome to just be a part of something not only that's that massive like to the world, but just to like Strokes fans in general. Like it's just such an iconic thing overall. So it's got to feel so cool to just be Gordon Raphael, producer on Is This It? Room on Fire. Like that's got to be awesome.
Well, the main reason it's awesome is because all my life, even when I was a little kid, 10 years old, and I found that Sergeant Pepper's record when I was 10. It's like it was brand new.
Yeah.
And it's
Wow.
like, music just blew my mind. And I was like a huge fan. I'm still a huge fan, and so I listened to so much music, and I really put a lot of artists up on really high pedestals. I still do. Jimi Hendrix, The Doors, Cream, all these bands, Yes, and
Wow.
so
Great bands.
the fact that something I was involved with, other people in the world feel the same way about that as I do about like Electric Ladyland. Like it's so crazy and cool to me because I
Yeah.
know how I feel about Electric Ladyland, and these people in the world feel the same way about Is This It and Room on
Yeah.
Fire. It's like a real like payback feeling. Like I
Yeah.
did it, now
Yep.
you're doing it, and that's awesome.
That's
Yeah.
so cool. And you mentioned Sergeant Pepper. This is kind of me question. I'm a massive Beatles fan, as you know already. You said you picked that up new in like a store. Like what was that like back then, like in the '60s, like to walk into a store and like pick up a Beatles record? Like that's
Well,
had to have been so cool.
I did that for other Beatles records, but when I was 10 years old, my dad brought it into the house,
Okay.
and he basically put it on the turntable because he was a musician, a jazz musician.
Hmm.
And when I heard that music, it was like basic. A lot of people say this. I've heard people say it like the world turned from black and white to color. I think Ozzy Osbourne said that.
Mm,
It's like, what the hell? It
yeah.
just felt like something was happening in the world because of that music. It changed the perspective on everything, you
Yeah.
know, changed the focus, it changed the color, it changed the possibilities.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's they're definitely they're my inspiration. Paul McCartney's why I picked up a bass, which is why I picked up a guitar. Like so the Beatles are definitely the massive like inspiration for me. I know Will's also a Beatles fan as well. But that's just cool that you mentioned Sergeant Pepper. So I had to jump on it to have a couple anytime any chance to talk
Yeah.
about that record. It's awesome.
They were my first musical inspiration for sure. And luckily they were joined by a lot of other people. So it became a
Mhm.
pantheon very quickly.
Yeah. Um, I know from watching your interviews, you're a big like I'm a big fan of it as well. Like, can you tell us some unique like gear facts about Is This It? Like, I know you already talked
Earphone.
about Fab's
Yeah.
drums, but some unique things that you did like on that record with the gear.
In fact, I'm recording my audio through the same thing that I recorded Julian's vocals.
Oh my
The
god.
most interesting, I don't know, for the album, I borrowed some equipment from a really good friend of mine, Scott Clark over there at Mercy Sound in New York. He lent me some Neve modules. He lent me some API, and I learned from that day on. I think from Is This It until now, I always record guitars with API preamps.
Mhm.
Just because I had such good luck with that, and they're so great. And Neves, I love them for everything. And I have this Avalon, which is what I ran Julian's vocals through. And I think they liked it so much that they brought it on tour for the first few years. They were singing through that live on stage on their first big tours. So
Wow.
I think that was some of the best gear. And my friend lent me one of those giant Ampeg bass amps that kind of has like 10 9-inch speakers or something
Yeah,
in it.
they're like massive. They're huge.
It's called
Yeah.
the Fridge, and that was a really big thing on Is This It? That helped the bass sound like just
Yeah.
walls of sound.
That's awesome. Yeah, because that record, I mean, the first two records specifically, like they have that type of unique sound that separates them from the rest, which I know a lot of people talk about. I know you've talked about it a lot, but it's crazy like how much unique setups that what you just talked about and things that I read like you guys had that was completely different from anyone else was doing in a studio. Which I think is like something that you said in one of the interviews where you're like, I just wanted to like I wanted to do something different. Like let's try this, let's try it this way. And then that's a lot of the stuff he ended up keeping, which is awesome. Kind of like an easy or a basic question. I feel like this is a basic one, but what was your favorite song, if you have one, song that you produced on Is This It? And do you have a regular just that you like to listen to? Or is there two different ones there?
I think for 2 years after we made the album, I just couldn't stop talking about Yes, Take It or Leave It. You know, I just couldn't stop listening to it and talking about it. That was like my number one. And then I started like just loving Hard to Explain and Soma and Alone Together. I think they're really weird songs.
Favorite. Alone Together is my favorite.
And then all of a sudden, like in the last few years, I've really liked Trying Your Luck. That's been like my favorite. It's just the subtle rhythm changes. The rhythm changes on that are just insane to me. They just feel so crazy. They're so drastic yet subtle at the same time. I dig that song.
It's beautiful. Will, what talk about what are your favorites on that record? If you had any questions
I would say, my favorites would be like The Modern Age, and then Trying Your Luck recently. That's funny you say that. Recently, Trying Your Luck has been my favorite. One that's been on repeat.
We've been doing the way the podcast works is we do every song, so like track 1 for Is This It, and then track 1 for Arctic Monkeys debut album, then episode 2 is track 2. So we did Trying Your Luck recently, and I think we all were like, wait a minute, like I kind of forgot. I mean, didn't forget about it, of course. We're like, wow, that we listened to it on my really good speaker, and we're like, wow, this thing has like layers to it. We love that when it gets like fast and Julian starts, belting a little bit. Like that is a really good point out. That's definitely a standout that I feel like more people should talk about for sure in that record. Cool. So onto Room on Fire. So Nigel Godrich from who does like Radiohead and stuff was supposed to be the producer, right? And then they ended up scrapping that and going with you, right?
Yeah, that's true. Boy, I was upset too when they started with him. I thought, oh shit. Now that they're with him, they're gonna find out how really records should sound. And they'll never come back to me.
Yeah. What was the story behind, like, what made them? So I read that it was pretty much like they just weren't able to really get them. Is that kind of the story of how that went versus like what you were able to do with them?
There is a golden story. I don't know how happy the Strokes would be or for me to tell it, but I don't think I've ever told it before. Maybe I have a few times. Okay, listen.
Okay.
Everything was going fine. The first setting up, the sounds were great. But then they were still just in the early days of setting up and they were getting the drum sounds. And Julian went to Nigel and he said, hey, Nigel, I like the drum sounds, but let's work on the hi-hat. And Nigel said, Julian, a hi-hat is a hi-hat. And they fired him right away for saying that. Okay. Wow. Because for Julian, a hi-hat is like a wine cellar full of the best wines in the world. Like, do you want this hi-hat or, oh, what about this delightful other hi-hat? Or what about this particular hi-hat? He's in, like, for him, each song, each drum for each song has to be a certain way. It's not like just a normal sound. No normal sound will ever appear on a Julian Casablancas production or recording ever. It has to be completely unique for that song. And so, Nigel didn't know that. And I don't know if Julian just did that so he'd fall in a trap and then he could go back to, I don't know what the reasoning behind all that was, but that's what I heard. That's what I heard.
I feel like he should know not to like go to Julian and be like, hey, no, it's this. Like, I feel like I'm working with him. Like Julian knows what he's doing, especially if he's like being so specific on that thing. There's definitely a reason why, like, hey, like this needs to be this way. You know what I mean? That's interesting. Thank you for telling us that. I definitely didn't hear that. That's awesome. Or that's a really good fact. Did you hear that work that was like scrapped from then? Did you hear that and like you changed it a little bit?
I don't think anyone's ever heard it. I don't think it exists.
Okay, so they literally were just like, delete, see you later, start fresh.
It was like, I don't know, we're not even gonna record this. Sorry.
Yeah.
I don't know how far they got. Again, I was in England, minding my own business, recording bands, and all of a sudden I get a call from the manager, Ryan Gentles at WizKid. Hey, Gordon, what are you doing? Oh, just recording band. You want to come to New York? Why? Oh, the Strokes want to work on their second album with you. What the hell? Are you kidding me?
So like similar experiences on both albums. You were like surprised.
I could not believe. Yeah.
That's crazy. I did read a little bit of a thing that Nick said. He said Nick said that the album would have been a little bit better if he had another 2 weeks. Do you think that is true? Like, you guys were on a time crunch for this one, right?
Which one?
For Room on Fire?
I don't know. I don't feel like we were on a time crunch. Maybe they had some tour. Maybe they had some tours to play.
Yeah.
And I mean, Julian said the same thing about Is This It? He wished he had more time to make it better.
Yeah. Wow, it's crazy that he 2 weeks. I mean, that's definitely a lot of work, like on music, if that truly is. I'm curious what they would work on, because I just feel like Room on Fire is my favorite Strokes record. Just all in all, lyrically, instrumentally, it didn't start that way. I was a later Strokes fan, so of course when the New Abnormal came out, I fell in love with that. But as I revisited and really dug deep into them years and years ago, Room on Fire just like stood out like that. This one is my most excited to talk about, which in the next season of our podcast, like we're starting Room on Fire, and I'm ecstatic to talk about it. Kind of like what we are now. Was there anything that you could talk about in terms of like a different approach to Room on Fire versus Is This It? Was there any like different things that you did on approaching that one?
The cutest thing in the world was that for Room on Fire, normally I'm sitting in a big control room and I'm looking through a glass window into a big room where the musicians are. And, for Is This It? Julian sang out in the big room. But for Room on Fire, he put a chair right next to my chair. Like he just cozied his chair right up to me in the control room. And we both wore headphones, and he sat next to me, singing right next to me. The whole album was done, many days of singing right there in the control room next to me. And that was a super good feeling. Yeah.
Yeah. That's is that something that you thought would have like come from like a Julian or any of them, or is that just like, hey, like I'm here, this is awesome, like this moment is amazing? Was that just out of nowhere?
I have no idea why he chose. He just, I set up the mic out there. He goes, "Hey, you know what? Let me come in there. I want to sit right there. I want to sit there and do it."
Wow.
Okay, whatever. I was surprised, but it was really adorable, actually.
I love that. Automatic Stop is one of my favorites, if not, a top 3 favorite Strokes song. And I saw that Albert has writing credits on that too. He's like the only one on that whole record to have any other writing credits on it.
I didn't know that. I did not know that.
Yeah, he was, when I looked at everything, I looked at all the types of things, and his name is the only other one on that whole record for lyrics. Cool. Do you have any stories? I know this is like super specific, but do you have any stories about recording that song? That song just sounds so good. It's really well produced. Of course, it's lyrically great, musically great. Do you have any stories from recording Automatic Stop?
I don't think I have a specific memory of that song in particular. One of the reasons is that we worked for 3 months on that album. The first album was 7 weeks. This was 3 months.
Yeah.
And all the songs had different names when we were recording them. They had made up names that were just placeholder names, like Butt Cheek was one song. Zinui was another. They had a lot of strange names. And then all of a sudden, at the end, they changed the names around before it came out on the album. So that's one of the reasons I don't have some memory. I remember a song like Under Control, like crystal clear. Like
Yeah.
that song really was something special when we were recording it.
So tell me about that. If you have some stories, I'd love to hear about it.
Well, the most impressive thing was, the Strokes always played together in a big room, really loud, and I'd record it. And I'd hear the speakers in the control room without the vocals. They did the instruments.
Mm-hmm.
And for some reason, when I heard the music for Under Control coming through the speakers, it had this kind of otherworldly dimension to it. It felt like the air is kind of wobbling, like everything was wobbling. It felt like the walls were kind of wobbling. And it was kind of going, what is that? What's going on? It just sounds so cool. It's got this depth perception thing to it that I really wasn't expecting. And I never heard anything like it before or since. So I just picked up on it right away, even before the vocals were on the song. It just felt unbelievably cool sounding.
Yeah, a lot of songs on that record sound just like they were beyond their time, like when it came out. I Can't Win is one of my favorites too, like the way that starts with that awesome like Hard Day's Night type, put like one chord and then get into it. Everything about it was great. I think Will's computer died, so I think that's why he's frozen.
Oh no, should we have a funeral?
Yeah, right. Yes. One of the questions I had for this one, which I actually always wanted to know, what was the idea with like the really long? I guess you might not have been involved because you said like with the writing and stuff, but the songs have like really long intro pauses, like for some of them. Like, do you know like what the thought process was, or is that another like band thing?
People have actually asked me that question this year more than like almost ever before. Like people are really focused on it, right?
Yeah.
And I do know the answer because that happened. That was a choice made in the mastering lab. Like, we recorded all the songs individually. We just had a hard drive with, 11 songs or however many songs there are. And when we went to the mastering lab, it's like, how do you want this on the CD? How much space should we have? Normally it's like, what do they say? Like 1.5 seconds. And Julian's like, hey, what if we try like 2.5 or 3 seconds? And why, Julian? Why do you want to do that? He said, it kind of lets people think about the song that just played, maybe clear their palate. It's like, you don't want to rush food, just, combine a bunch of, you want to eat one thing, then have a little time, then do the next one. So those were the reasons that he put a little extra space so people could digest the song previously a little better.
Yeah. Wow. I've always wondered that. And it's like, it's not that it doesn't flow properly. It's just, it's always, it's funny when like, if I have a song on and I'm streaming and there's like a really random pause, I'm like, oh yeah, that's probably a Room on Fire song. That's probably one of those. It takes a little bit. I love that though. Did you have a favorite on Room on Fire that you worked on specifically?
I did. Reptilia was definitely a top favorite, and so was Under Control.
Yeah.
Like those two songs just kind of blew my mind heavily.
What was just because it's so big, what was the process on Reptilia, since that's pretty much I think their top stream, one of their top stream songs, one of the fan favorite, of course. How did you feel recording a song that like groundbreaking, like once again on album 2?
I don't know. Mostly I was thinking about, oh my God, that riff and that guitar stuff that Nick is doing is just off the hook. How the hell to do it? And I don't know, I was really super impressed with the guitars on that one.
Yeah, it sounds incredible. Oh, even to this day, it's amazing. Did you have any interesting gear facts on Room on Fire that differed a little bit from Is This It?
I guess it was interesting because since I wasn't living in New York, I was in London. We were using a real pro studio with all this incredible gear, like tons of really incredible gear in a much bigger room. And we were using this SSL console. Like I never had a console in my studio. I just had preamps. Mm-hmm. There's this giant mixing console, SSL, and we were recording like the first third of the album. And after recording 1/3 of the album, a couple weeks work, 3-4 weeks of work, Julian decided that he just hated the sound of the guitars running through the SSL. And we had to go about finding a way to make the guitars sound like they weren't recorded through the SSL. So that was really an interesting experience. We had to try all the different gear in the studio once it was recorded, and try to make those guitars sound better than they were recorded. So that took a lot of effort. I remember that was a big technical point in the studio.
Wow. There had to have been like so much going on in there too. Like, was there any thought in your mind, like when you were writing, or not writing, but when you were working on Room on Fire, that like, wow, is this it? Was this like big thing? Was there any like sort of pressure like at that point, or was it just another fun, like another day at the office, having a good time type situation for everybody?
For me, it was like another level, like, God, it was so fun. Like, Is This It is so big in the world, and the Strokes are so big, and now we're back together in New York in the summer, in this great studio with these great songs. I was having like massive amounts of fun. It was hard work, but it was fun. And I think they really did feel the pressure of like, whoa, will people like it as much as the last one? Are we still going to be cool? What's going to happen? I think they were really feeling that. And they're so young. I was like, whoa, if I was that age, I'd be like partying, like, Jesus Christ, we just went around the world about 10 times. Everyone loves us. We're like huge. We're like stars. Everybody just adores our music. I'd be concentrating on that, not like, oh my gosh, I hope this one's going to be good. Oh, I hope they're going to like it. I was really surprised that they focused on that.
That just goes to show you like their level of focus and the quality, and it comes out on everything that they do so clearly that they care about what they put out. And I think all of them, and you would know, I would not, but I feel like all of them are like, has to be good. We don't put it out. Like, it has to be, we need it to be this, we need it to be that. Very coherent.
Even for the live shows, I see them from year to year. I go check on them, and they will not get on a stage and do a show if they don't play tight as shit, and they practice and they know everything that's going on, and there's no messing around.
There's gotta be locked in.
Well, yeah, it's like years and years later, they're still like taking it just as serious.
I saw them couple years ago now. It's crazy how time flies. I saw them in New York. What's that one stadium? The baseball field one.
Shea Stadium?
No, not Shea. It's smaller. I think it's in Queens.
Okay.
Oh shoot, I forget what it was. Anyway, I saw them in New York like 2 years ago. It was them and a couple other bands. And then the year before, I saw them on tour with the Red Hot Chili Peppers. I saw them in Philadelphia in the Citizens Bank Park. And they were so, because when I saw them that first time, it's the first time I ever saw them. And I was just absolutely amazed with their ability to make it sound like they're pretty much just playing the recording, but also it's incredibly different because like they add their own little things like when they're live, but it just sounds so professional and so well done. And Julian's like raw vocals, I mean, like they're amazing when he's just doing his thing and he's not, overthinking. Like it's just they're magic when they play live, every single one of them.
I agree.
It's nuts. And then when I saw them in New York, it was the same. It was the same situation. With First Impressions, you were co-producer on that record, right? Type. What was their did you know like their vision or like what their direction was with going on to that one between Room on Fire as a sit?
It's a very strange story, that album, because when they called me over to New York for that album, they said the first thing they said is they want me to build them a studio in their practice room. So I spent some time making their studio into a professional studio, a rehearsal room into a professional studio. That was one thing. And then they said, we want you to stay because we're working on our next album, third album, and we don't have any songs. We're just going to write songs and we'll call you when we want you to record us. And so I spent like almost a year recording demos for First Impressions. Like all the songs that were on that album, I recorded the demo version while they were writing it. Okay. And very soon into the recording process, within the first couple of weeks, they brought in another producer, Paul McCartney's producer, in fact, who was always talking to Paul McCartney on the phone in the studio. And they brought in Paul McCartney's producer, and eventually they decided they wanted him to record the album and not me. So I left.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
And that, and how many, do you know, like how many, if you remember, like how many demos like was there for like a record like this? Like, did you,
I think with the Strokes, it's like they don't make extra songs. I don't think so. Like, you know, everything we recorded went on Is This It? Everything we recorded went on Room on Fire. Well, I think everything they did became first impressions.
Yeah. That that record's so unique. There's not a record that they've made that I didn't like. What do you have any like specifics on like anything that I could point out that you were directly involved with in that record? Like any songs that you particularly had like a hand in that that I would know?
The actual recording of the album was really confusing, and I'm surprised. I didn't even know for a long time that anything I worked on was on the album. Because I wasn't there for very long. I was there for the whole year working on the demos.
Yeah.
So I can't really say anything concrete about the album, but I can say that every song that was on that album, I helped them record the original versions that they used for the templates on that record.
Nice. Yeah, I know there's a lot of, when I listen to that record, there's a lot of inspirations I think that I hear like from This Is It and Room on Fire with a couple different things. I know the complete overall sound is not even close to the same exact thing, but it's always cool to listen to that and like listen to like little details within both. But I do have, because I know I'm running low on time here already. It's crazy how time flies. It's nuts. I do have some questions that some fans asked us on Reddit that I thought were super interesting. They were asking, how would you compare the experience of working with the Strokes for 2 albums to other albums that you have produced? Would you say it was fun experience overall? Were they hard to work with? So you kind of talked about most of that, but the experience of working on those 2 records, like was it similar to any other artist that you worked with before, or was it just kind of like its own thing?
It was its own thing because by the time we did Is This It, they already had this gigantic worldwide buzz that was generated from the EP, okay? So I never had the experience before or after of like a band that is red hot and the world is falling in love with them and they can't wait to hear the next thing they do. And they come in my studio and we're working on music knowing that the world is going to hear it, you know, and the world is going to get blown away. Most bands, it's like, well, we're going to make something and I don't know how we're going to promote it. You know, probably nobody will hear it except for our people in our town who go to our shows. But this was like, when we finish this, the entire world is going to hear it. That is fun. Like that is like a level of excitement that I've never known before. And of course, it happened again on Room on Fire. So in some ways, they were the most exciting just because of the vibe of the world and the relationship of the band in the world. You know, I've recorded a lot of bands that I think are just magical, like phenomenal music. Like Regina Spektor is a good example. Like that album was also extremely exciting to work on. And I don't know, I probably have 15 or 20 bands in my life that I've worked on that I think are phenomenal and unbelievable experiences, just hearing the music and working with the people.
Yeah.
But I've never had anything that went out and just like knocked the world out like the 2 Strokes, you know?
I definitely, I assume that's probably what you're gonna, because they're just so unique and groundbreaking. I think it would be very, very tough to top those types of experiences for sure.
Yeah. And I don't know, it was hard work because everybody was so serious. As I said, nobody was like, I'll play my drums and then I'm going to go to the pub for the rest of the time. There's like, I'll play my drums and I'm going to stand around and make sure that everybody else is doing is up to par, you know, that nobody's slacking and nobody's like overlooking something. Everybody was serious as hell. Yeah.
Which you would say like that was probably like a really good thing, right? Like they were still having fun, but like when it was time to get like the work done, like that's probably what made those things what they were, right?
It was hard because like even for like Is This It? We were staying up till 7 in the morning, like working around the clock. And like by the time the work was done, it was like so tired. You know, it was really exhausting, physically demanding to be concentrating that hard for so long.
Yeah.
But in the end, it ended, and it's worthwhile, totally worthwhile, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. One other interesting question I did that I saw here, which I actually was wondering too, while working with the band, was there a particular suggestion or moment that you made on an album that you're particularly proud of that you remember?
Absolutely, absolutely. There's on Is This It? There's a couple songs where there's like talking in the middle, like you just in the middle of the song when there's an instrumental break, somebody's talking and saying something, like, or even when he's going like on New York City Cops, like, nah, no, that's not it.
Yeah.
He's like talking, he's doing all this joking around in the front, and the band goddamn expected me to erase that and like clean it up for the final version, you know. And then as weeks were going around, they noticed like it's still there. It's still there. Then at the very end, they confronted me and said, like, hey, Gordon, Julian's talking right there, man. Aren't you going to get rid of it? I said, no, man. It's so cool. It sounds so weird. It's so, leave it in there. And they looked at me like, are you crazy? But somehow they let me get my way, you know? And so there's a few sounds and a few noises and a couple talking things that they would have taken out, but I kind of stood up for them and that's cool. Believe me.
Yeah.
And they believed me. And now everybody hears it every time they hear the music, you know?
Yep. I always think it's awesome when bands do that, when they like leave in some like little banter while they're recording, because it adds like a level of like you're kind of there in the room with them, like it's kind of raw,
Right.
you know what I mean? So I agree that that was definitely something that I really wouldn't want to kick out of that either. So good call for sure. I'm glad they stuck to your guns there. Yeah. What's your opinion like on the band, like for like these days? Like how do you feel about their evolution, like in sound? Like have you listened to their, you know, New Abnormal, Come Down Machine, all those guys? Like what's your opinion on all that stuff?
Well, this may shock you, but I heard the album First Impressions one time through. You know, I didn't really work on that one. It was not really my album. It wasn't my sounds. I heard it once through and I thought, okay, yeah, I don't really enjoy the experience of hearing them with this, like the other woman, the other producers, like the other woman. So I really haven't heard the other albums that they made after I worked with them. Of course, I've seen them live. Even last September, I saw them. And so like almost every year, whenever they tour, I'll see them once. And I always love hanging out with them. And I hear so I've heard some, because they do play some of the songs from the other albums live. So I can't lie. I have heard some of the songs and some of them are really cool. And I've heard some of Julian's solo music before too. I've seen The Voids like 3 times live.
I was gonna ask you about that. Yeah.
Yeah.
And how do you feel about The Voids?
I love that song, Human Sadness. I think it's unbelievable masterpiece.
It is.
And I like that song, Where No Eagles Fly. I think it's really cool as shit.
Yeah.
You know? And so far, those are my favorites.
Yeah. The human sadness is like, it's so, it's so hard to even deconstruct what he was able to do with a song like that. It is a phenomenal song, and like the work that he's doing with that band, he's just a genius. I'm such a, as you can probably tell, such a massive Julian fan. He's you know, one of my favorite artists of all time. He's incredible. So The Voids, his solo stuff that he did, like Phrases for the Young, a lot of that stuff. Were you you heard his stuff with Phrases, right? His solo stuff.
I saw the tour, actually. I saw that tour in Berlin when I was living there. So
sweet.
Yeah.
How was that?
It was very cool.
Incredible.
And I got to have the band and meet everybody in the band, and it was really cool.
Yeah. That's awesome. I'm jealous. So I know we're running. I have just a couple more questions here and I'll let you go. This is kind of a fun one.
You still got to ask me my Arctic Monkeys story.
Yep. I do have that here. I will not forget.
So what's your question?
What was the hardest that everyone / you have laughed while making a record? What's like a funny story that you and the band had?
God, I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. I can't. I know they were laughing a lot. I wasn't laughing a lot during the record. I was like kind of up to my eyes in
Yeah.
work, but I know they were laughing sometimes. I can't really answer that. That's a great question, but
Yeah.
you know, I don't remember. I don't remember laughter being a huge part of it.
It's understandable. Yeah, I mean, you're there, you're doing a job, and you did it well. It's 100% understandable.
There was wonderment and amazement.
Oh
There's
yeah,
a lot of that going on, man. Because they liked what they were hearing, and I was digging it. You know, we were making something incredible. So I was amazed very frequently
yeah.
while working with them, but I didn't like howl and laughter too
Hmm.
much.
Makes sense. Gotcha. Yeah. If you want to tell me your Arctic Monkey story, we'd love to hear that. I'm
Okay.
excited.
So in the year like 2005 or 2006, I can't remember which year it was, but I was living in Berlin.
Hmm.
And I was with my girlfriend at the time, and we were at Starbucks in downtown Berlin, let's say. And my girlfriend kind of whispers, pulls me and said, "Hey, Gordon, that's the Arctic Monkeys in front of us right now." And they were just, it was their first international tour. Like they were playing Europe for the first time. Okay. And there was a big buzz about them, like huge buzz, but there was like, they were so young. You know, how young must they have been to be touring their first
Yeah,
album? Okay.
it's crazy.
And so when my girlfriend told me that, I thought she was joking and she just meant these German guys in front of me that had the Arctic Monkeys haircuts or something. And I kind of looked at her like, come on, come on. And she said, "Oh, really?" So they're in front of me, like looking at the counter. And I tapped on one guy's shoulder. I said, "Hi." And they looked at me like, "What?" And I said, I'm Gordon Raphael. I'm the Strokes producer." Like, "Oh my God, we
Yeah.
love the Strokes." They were all friendly and happy and this
Hmm.
really excited. And I was like, feeling like, oh man, I just ran into the next hottest band in the world
Yep.
right here at Starbucks. And
That's
they said,
so funny.
"Hey,"
Starbucks in Berlin.
they said, "Okay, we're playing tonight at Columbia Hall. Here, you got to come down. We'll put your name on the list, and you come backstage and hang with us." So me and my girlfriend went, and we hung out with them backstage, and we saw the show from the side of the stage. I was really impressed with them. Like they were really
Yeah.
good. I couldn't believe how good Alex was on his guitar and how good Matt was on his guitar and the
Yep.
other guitar player that they had at the
Jamie.
time.
Hmm.
Yeah, how good he was. I was like, wow. And
Yeah.
when he got off stage, the first thing I asked him, I said, "Hey, how did you learn to play guitar like that? Like, Jesus, you're so young. How did you learn that?" And he
Yeah.
said, like, "My dad's a jazz guitar player, or he studied jazz guitar or something like that." And oh, okay,
Yep.
I get it. Not too many rockers at that time were learning jazz stuff. Okay.
Yeah.
And then we went out to party after party until like 4 in the morning. And
Oh my gosh.
I've never spoken with them or seen them again. I have no other stories, but that's a good little Arctic Monkeys, Gordon Raphael
I
moment.
I'd say so, especially how it came to be and where. That's crazy. Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, we exactly why what you just said is why we do this with both of them, because like to us, like the Arctic Monkeys wrote a song that literally the first line is "I wanted to be one of the Strokes." So like we knew that Alex and the band love the Strokes. So like, cool, why don't we just combine these fan bases? We love both bands, let's do it.
Mhm.
But I love that you pointed out like how incredibly talented they were at like such a young age, just like the Strokes. But
Yeah.
when you watch the
Yeah.
Arctic Monkeys, the stuff that they did on their debut album in the early 2000, like 2005, like oh my god, it was unlike anything that was coming out in like the UK at that point. It was crazy. Um,
Right.
and we just finished talking about that record, and it's been a blast to revisit that one because nowadays like people think about AM and like that record from 2013, and that's
True.
what people really talk about. And it's like, no, go back and listen to the early stuff if you want to hear like the crazy stuff. It's insane. um
Mhm.
but yeah, that's awesome. Thank you for sharing that. I appreciate that. But I think it is time to let you go. I just wanted to, on behalf of me and Will, we appreciate you taking the time and answering our questions. Hopefully, we can talk to you again once we have our professional setup. I hope this is okay enough.
Fine. It's all fine.
All good. Yeah, the way of this whole thing, we DM Julian on Instagram like months ago, and he messaged Will back because we were asking him about like, hey, we're planning on doing something with the Strokes. We never thought he'd answer, but he did, and we posted that on Reddit, and it blew up. And we're like, oh crap, we shouldn't have done that, because people were asking like when it was coming out. We haven't even recorded an episode yet. We just came up with the name and the title. So we've been recording week to week and release instead of doing like the whole thing and releasing it. So we just didn't have time to upgrade everything. But we would love to at some point down the line talk to you again. We have some stuff set up, but we really, really appreciate you taking the time, and we'll keep you updated on when it comes out. And I hope you have a great day, and thank you so much.
All right, and thank you for having me.
Thank you so much, man. I appreciate it.
Right. Cheers.
Have a great day.
Bye.
Nice to meet you. Bye-bye. Hey guys, it's Jared here. Thank you so much for listening to the episode. You can find us on all our socials at Karma and Tranquility, and Twitter, Karma and Tranquil. Our link trees are posted in every single description on every social, so you can access everything that we have to offer. And we will see you every Wednesday for our normal episodes and every Friday for a bonus episode.